So there's been some breaking news in the developments of the UFC White House card. Everybody knows about how excited and elated Jon Jones was about the possibility of returning to the UFC, but more importantly, returning to probably one of the most historic and symbolic events that's ever going to go down in UFC history and probably combat sports, the UFC White House card that's going to happen on June 14th to celebrate the nation's 250th birthday and the 80th birthday of President Donald J. Trump. Well, there's been a huge twist and turn. Apparently, Jon Jones will not be fighting at the UFC White House card, nor will he be fighting in the UFC ever again. In fact, a reporter asked Dana White, should we assume that, Jon Jones is essentially retired? And Dana White responded by saying yes.
Is it fair to say then Jon Jones is retired and this is the end of his time?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is very interesting, guys, because Jon Jones has just asked the UFC to release him from his contract. And if that actually happens, then it could really shake the entire fight business right down to its core. Because this isn't just like another Jon Jones controversy. Jon Jones has been known for some controversial moments throughout his career. And it's been publicly noted that Jon Jones and Dana White have not always had the best relationship. They did have a pretty good relationship. It's been cordial to a degree, lots of ups, lots of downs. But I guess, and I mean, Dana White never said this, but to me, it seems like there's probably been more downs than there's been ups, right? So this recent statement by Jon Jones could expose something much bigger than what's going on behind the scenes of the UFC. So it's very, very interesting, guys. But let's chat about it. Let's kind of get to it. Welcome back. Welcome to Duality 7X. I'm your host, Shiraz. This is breaking news, guys. This is not the kind of news that I honestly thought we were going to chat about. I, like many other people, thought that Jon Jones was definitely going to be on the UFC White House card. And I mean, there's been a lot of talks, a lot of rumors kind of swirling around Jon Jones' return. And a lot of people were under the assumption that it was going to happen. Dana White never said yes, but he never said no. In fact, actually, let me just kind of redact my statement here, because Dana White actually did go on record saying that Jon Jones fighting on the UFC White House card is like 1,000,000,000 to 1. It's not going to happen. But then I don't know what kept pulling us in a direction that it was going to happen. Probably the many social media posts by Jon Jones, just, super elated, happy, talking about how he's training again and, things are going really well. And then just recently, like literally a week before Dana White made the announcement as to who's fighting at the UFC White House card, Jon Jones actually went public in saying that he's in negotiations with the UFC. That's huge. That was just like a bombshell announcement. And as soon as he said that he's in negotiations with the UFC, a lot of us, including myself, a lot of us out there actually thought that they're negotiating terms with Jon Jones to return to the UFC and to fight on the UFC White House card. Now, there was some interesting events that happened, because while Jon Jones made that public about his negotiations happening behind the scenes with the UFC, guess what happened? El Potan, Alex Pereira, former light heavyweight champion of the world, vacates his light heavyweight championship title, says he wants to move up to heavyweight. So the social media went on fire. People were like starting to put two and two together. They're like, okay, Potan, he's going from 185 pounds and he's currently at 243 pounds. He's a big boy. He wants to fight heavyweight. And we all knew he wanted to go heavyweight at some point because he's been flirting. Even before he won the light heavyweight championship title when he beat Magomedov, he was talking about wanting to go to the heavyweight division. And so yeah, here's a guy who's a current champion, vacates his title so he can make that move up to heavyweight. Now, usually people don't do that unless they know something special is waiting for them around the corner. And we thought that that something special was Jon Jones. Well, apparently it wasn't. It's definitely not Jon Jones. And I'll get to all that in just a second. But Jon Jones, like, I mean, if I was betting on Polymarket or something like that, I would have lost a lot of money because I would have thought for sure he was going to be on that card. I thought he was going to headline the UFC White House card, fighting Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira is going for his third divisional title, and you know, I mean, he's breaking, like, I mean, he's going for legacy here, and he's breaking records. Like, I mean, Alex Pereira is just at a different level. He's just a different fighter altogether. And then Jon Jones, I thought, was chasing legacy here, trying to have that, maybe that one last fight in the heavyweight division so he can write the final chapter in his career, close it off. And who knows what would have happened if had these guys fought, what the outcome would have been, where his career would have gone from here. But that was the impression. I also thought Conor McGregor was going to be on that card as well. I thought Conor McGregor either, you know, taking on Michael Chandler, possibly Kobe Covington, maybe even Islam Makhachev, I mean, Neil Topuria. I mean, there were so many names, but no, Conor McGregor is not on the White House card. So this is just, it's absolutely shocking. And I'll get to Potan a little bit later, and I'll play the entire video. I want you to hear Dana White's. So anyways, Jon Jones made a statement, okay, to Dana White and the UFC, and then Dana White responded, and I'll play the clip in its entirety a little bit later here, closer to the end of this video. So you guys are going to have to stick around and watch this. So when Jon Jones and Dana White, you know, started arguing in public, you know, obviously that means that something's going on behind the scenes, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that something good is happening. It could just be an argument, a disagreement, and a butting of the heads, you know, and sometimes cooler heads prevail. So people just walk away from a fight, an argument, and reconvene at some point. But a lot of people were spinning it. Oh no, they're arguing, and that's going to turn into a positive. No, these guys had these guys had a pretty rocky relationship, right? And this time around, the situation did feel somewhat a little bit differently because according to Jon Jones himself, Jon Jones said that the UFC was actively negotiating with him to fight on the UFC White House card on June 14th, June 14th. And then suddenly Dana White came out and said something entirely different, right? So the real question here is simple. Who is actually telling the truth? And more importantly, what does the situation tell us about the power dynamics between the fighters and the UFC right now? Because this story probably is going to reveal a lot more about how big the power dynamics and how big politics are in the UFC, and how one of their biggest MMA stars, okay, was being treated behind the scenes. Now, I should make something clear. Dana White has been quite candid. He's been pretty consistent in saying that Jon Jones is not going to fight on the UFC White House card. And guess what? He's not fighting on the UFC White House card. So he's been pretty consistent that way. And yeah, there was a time where I actually thought things were going in a positive direction just based on Jon Jones' social media, you know, posts, and thinking that maybe Dana was singing a little bit of a different tune, because he did admit that the UFC was talking to Jon Jones. Now, he recently said that, yeah, I didn't lie about that. We talked to Jon Jones, but guess what? We talked to every fighter because we wanted to get a feel for the angles. We wanted to get a feel to see if there was something here, something that we could possibly do. So this is how they matchmake apparently. And then, uh, you know, after after really looking into this, they just felt that they wanted to walk away from Jon Jones, right? So let me give you guys a little bit of context, and here's where the situation began, because this is important. Because over the weekend during UFC 326, right, Dana White addressed the rumors about Jon Jones potentially fighting in the upcoming UFC White House card, and Dana's response about Jon Jones was pretty blunt, right? So if anyone had any hope, inkling that something was going to happen, Jon Jones was going to be on that card, was their dreams are dashed. Okay, basically Dana White popped whatever balloon was out there, and all the air was deflated out of that balloon. And then while that balloon fell to the ground, Dana White came for good measure and stomped on it. So there's no chance of Jon Jones fighting on this card. And if it does happen, then we're talking about WWE style theatrics or something. I don't know. Okay. Or we're living in an alternate universe. I actually think ever since COVID, we've been flipped and we're living in an alternate universe. I mean, anything crazy that you could think of is actually happening in today's day and age. But anyhow, guys, um, yeah, Dana White essentially said that Jon Jones was never ever going to fight on that card, and he also suggested that Jon Jones was responsible himself for spreading rumors about the fight, and that didn't sit well with Jon Jones. All right, not at all. Because shortly after those comments were made, Jon Jones jumped on X and posted a very long response that basically called out Dana White directly. And in the past, Jones said something. Sorry, in the post, Jon Jones said something that was very interesting. He claimed that there was actual real negotiations going on in the background, not just an interview or a talk. He said that there were real negotiations happening with the UFC behind the scenes between Jon Jones and his team, right, to fight on the UFC White House card. It wasn't just talk. He said there were actual negotiations. So the question comes down to is, what happened? What happened if real negotiations were happening, and if it wasn't just an interview or a talk with fighters, like how Dana White said that the UFC was talking to everybody, if these were real negotiations, the question comes down to is really what happened? Why didn't this fight come to fruition? Right? So is there like a money dispute perhaps? Because according to Jones, he originally had a number in mind for the fight, but he says that he lowered that number during negotiations to try to make that fight happen. So they were talking money. Obviously, they were talking money. And in return, Jones said that the UFC lowballed him big time. And that's where things started to get a little bit messy, right? Because Jones also addressed something that Dana White mentioned earlier, his hip injury, right? But he also pushed back on that idea because he said that the injury is not stopping him from fighting. And in fact, Jones recently received stem cell treatment and said that he's actually been preparing for training camp, right? So according to him, camp was supposed to start this week. And so from Jones' perspective, he was getting ready to fight, which makes Dana White's comments look somewhat strange if they were actually true. Okay, I want to read to you guys a statement from Jon Jones on X. Okay, this is a statement. It's a little lengthy, but bear with me, guys. We'll get through this. So this is Jon Jones. Okay, I'm going to read it as if from his first person narrative. Okay. Hey everybody, I want to address Dana White's comments from this past weekend because the truth matters to me and the fans. Dana, you were heated about why I'm not on the White House card, but let's clear something up. My team and I were actually negotiating with the UFC for that fight. Real negotiations. I even came down from my original number and what was I offered in return? Question mark. I was lowballed. Yes, I have arthritis in my hip and it's painful, but that doesn't mean I can't fight. So let me get this straight. If I had accepted the lowball offer, suddenly hip would be fine and I'd be on the White House card. That doesn't make any sense. I even received stem cell treatment last week to get ready for the White House card, and training camp was scheduled to start today. I was preparing to be ready. I understand business deals fall through sometimes, but going up publicly and saying things that aren't true isn't right. After everything I've given to the UFC, the years, the title defenses, the fights, hearing that I'm done is disappointing, especially when, as recently as Friday, UFC was calling me, trying to get me on the White House card for a much lower number. If the UFC truly feels like I'm done, then I respectfully ask to be released from my contract today. No more spins, no more games. Thank you to the real fans who know what's up. Bones out. Wow. That was a statement from Jon Jones on Twitter, calling out Dana, calling out the UFC, and calling out what seems, from his perspective, a sham in negotiations, because he truly felt that there was real negotiations happening behind the scenes, and Dana White, from what he was saying, spun it entirely different. So let's talk about the stakes, guys. Like, this is why this is a big deal, because now this is where the story gets even bigger. Because now, if you read there, towards the end of his post, Jon Jones dropped the line that shocked everyone. He said, if the UFC truly believes that I'm done, then I respectfully ask to be released from my contract today. No more spins, no more games, right? And that's what Jon Jones wants. Jon Jones wants to be released from the UFC. And if you know anything about the UFC's business model, that's a massive, massive statement, because the UFC almost never, never releases fighters who still hold value, especially somebody like Jon Jones, who's a former world champion. I mean, we're talking about probably one of UFC's biggest names, one of MMA's biggest names. I mean, he is a walking, living legend, a former two-division champion, guys. Um, I mean, a fighter many people still consider to be probably a GOAT, one of the greatest of all times. And guys, I mean, that's a huge, huge statement for people to still think of Jon Jones as the GOAT. I mean, that's saying a lot. So Jon Jones truly wants to become a free agent, because it doesn't seem like Jon Jones is set to retire. He wants to be released from his contract so he can become a free agent, and that would send shockwaves through the entire world of combat sports, right? To the entire industry. And that means that Jon Jones is going to be knocking on some doors, and that's going to be a big loss to the UFC. So the interesting part to me is that most people, and the stuff that I'm surprised a lot of people aren't even talking about, is that Jon Jones really wants out of the UFC, guys. That's shocking. So anyways, there's a very good chance he already knows exactly where he could go next and who could be potentially managing him. And that possibly could completely change the power balance in the world of MMA as we know it. Just think about the current landscape, guys, the current geography of combat sports right now. For most of the UFC's history, fighters don't really have any real options, right? So if you were the biggest star in MMA and you fought in the UFC, that was it. But today that's starting to change, right? You've got PFL, you've got one championship, you've got big money crossover fights into boxing, and even some major Saudi-backed events entering the market. So that business model is starting to get a lot more competitive, and that changes negotiation leverage. And to be clear, guys, I don't actually expect the UFC to release Jon Jones, but the fact that he's making and asking for this publicly on social media tells you that negotiations have obviously reached a boiling point or a breaking point, and things went completely south, right? And now with Dana White coming out and saying that he'll never fight in the UFC, that just pissed Jon Jones off, right? And so anyways, guys, this is about value. We're talking about one of the biggest stars in MMA, one of the biggest stars that the UFC produced, and how much the UFC is actually willing to pay this guy. Because according to Jon Jones, it looks like they lowballed him big time, like a lot less than what he was anticipating to make on the UFC White House card. And honestly, this situation says a lot about where Jon Jones is in his career right now. He's not the young champion chasing belts anymore. He's a legacy fighter right now, right? He's a guy who wants the big fights, right? He wants to be tested. He wants to be challenged. He doesn't want to ride off on his, his career-ending tour with just easy fights. He wants to be challenged with the best of the best. And from what we knew, it looked like it was going to be Jon Jones and Alex Pereira. Anyways, guys, it could have been a huge payday. Probably one of the biggest fights in MMA. Probably one of the biggest fights in MMA in the UFC, as we know it. We're not going to see that fight now. And I mean, look, and the White House card would have been exactly that, right? A historical, not only symbolic, but absolutely historic. I mean, anyways, guys, it is going to garner a lot of global attention. There's going to be massive, massive hype, lots of marketing. Money's going to be thrown around. And anyways, guys, that takes us right back to the core issue here. The entire situation may not actually be about the White House card after all. It might simply be about respect in negotiation or negotiating power between a fighter and the promotion that technically built his career. So anyways, guys, that's kind of where I stand. At the end of the day, Jon Jones is asking for his release from the UFC.
Saw, but this morning, Jon Jones went on a bit of a Twitter tirade, and then he ended up deleting them. Have you seen his comments?
No.
Or he basically very heavily pushed back on you, saying that there were no negotiations. And then
I never said there were no negotiations. I never said that. I said, were they talking to Jon Jones? They talked to everybody. Everybody was talked to. Not one word of what I said was not true about the whole Jon Jones thing. And how many times have I sat up here and said, he's not fighting at the White House? No. And have you guys not all seen the video of the dude with the meta glasses on when he didn't know he was being filmed, telling them that his hips are fucking shot and he needs hip replacement? Did you not see the videos of him running on the flag football game? And what did I say that wasn't true? It was all true. And you guys all bust my balls about how much I love Jon Jones. And John's the greatest of all time. No way in hell Jon Jones is going to be booked for the White House card. Wasn't going to happen. But the matchmakers were out talking to everybody, seeing what was possible, and they brought me every possible fight that could be made.